breathe in, a nice aromatic smell and have some like healing music on and really be intentional with it if it's part of a routine. But if you get to the point where you're so stressed out and overwhelmed that you're like, oh my God, I just have to drink a glass of wine in the bath, then now we're at the point of self-preservation, not self-care.
All right, and you are locked into another episode of the Leo podcast. My name is Josh, but of course, you always know that I'm doing this all week, every week, well, once a week, basically. um, but yeah, welcome to another episode, and we're actually kicking off our mental health series. We did this last year, and we had a great time. We had some great guests, and we had some great guests this time around. And we took a poll, I think about a month ago, and although it was a resounding yes. Please do this again. We believe that mental health is very important. It's great to talk about the different aspects and also just bring awareness to not only the visible but the invisible. I don't want to call them plagues, but the invisible difficulties that we don't see. So before we get to that, I want to bring my wife Rebecca in.
Hey, everybody.
And so, Rebecca, you and I have dealt with our own type of, mental health things. Me with, anxiety. You with kind of like discovering, um, dislike with yourself and, harmful words, stuff like that. But you're actually going to be seeing a counselor about this.
Yeah, I finally made the step to go talk with someone just to help me, I don't know, parcel through all of the things that go on in my mind. It's just good to have somebody else to talk to and ask the right questions um, and help to provide a different perspective than my own. So it's always good.
Absolutely. And not too long ago, there was like a stigma, I think, around therapy or going to counseling. It's like, oh, well, you have a problem. You are, you're not right in the head. You gotta fix this. Where not necessarily true. I mean, a lot of you just need somebody to talk to because of maybe childhood repressed thoughts or something in the way of, hey, I've never really addressed this and it's now manifesting in these different ways that I don't know how to deal with it. And that's really at the heart of it. What I believe, counseling is, or going to therapy is, somebody listening who has the skills, the abilities to help you kind of like wade through all the weeds to get to the root issue of whatever you might be dealing with.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
But with that said, we're very happy to have our first guest of this series. We have founder and president of Carve Your Own Path, Amanda Kostura, and we're going to go ahead and bring her in right now.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Um, Thank you so much for being with us on the show today.
I am so glad to be here, and I just found out I didn't realize this was the first episode in the series. So
Yeah, it's
awesome.
a surprise.
No pressure, no pressure.
Yeah. Well, Amanda, when I looked, you were referred to us by somebody on a podcast guest site that I use sometimes to kind of like guess with credentials and stuff like that. So when I saw like Carve Your Own Path and your profession and your experience, I said, definitely want to have this person on. Like they definitely meet the qualifications of what we want to talk about. So again, thank you.
Absolutely.
Um, so we want to have our guests get to know you a little bit. So I'll start off the interview and then I'll let Becca take over. Tell us a little bit about your background, growing up, stuff like that. I know it's a loaded question, but
Yeah.
best as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And sorry, before I answer that question, I promise I will. I just loved what you were saying before I was brought in about normalizing therapy. There's is still a little bit of stigma. We're very much working on it. Social media podcasting is helping, getting the information
Yeah.
is helping. And the other key point of that is what Rebecca said is you just need help sorting that stuff out, right? Therapy isn't just for when you have severe mental illness and,
Hmm.
severe depression or, you can go to that, have that I won't say unbiased because it's hard to be unbiased when we all lived through a pandemic and things like that together. But just another trained person to help bounce those ideas. So I just want to say thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
So people ask me why I chose social work, and I just respond I didn't choose it; it chose me. If I look back at my life, and I think a lot of people, when you say social work or social worker, they think of the person that's taking someone's children away, and that's really all, or someone like maybe in a hospital setting. But our profession is so much broader than that, and we are in so many different areas of life. So if I look back, my mom saved a lot of my school records, which I'm very thankful for. But as I look back, even some of those, there was like a second grade first like assignment to get to know the teacher, and it was like, what do you think a teacher should be? And everything within it interwoven was like social justice and advocacy and kindness and things like that. Not in those terms, right? More at second grade level, but just looking back, I was always kind of built for this. And then my mom was a single parent. So we, went through some things and used system resources um, and I just, I didn't realize some of that until I was older in life. My brother had challenges with substance use, and so very young age went through that with him and treatment and criminal justice system and things like that. And then some other family members. I was always a person with resources and support, even as I got older. So
Right.
yeah, it just kind of flowed for me into life naturally into that program.
That's awesome. Yeah, you mentioned just a moment ago that social work is in a bunch of different areas. What are all of the areas where social workers are?
Oh my gosh, it's endless. Literally, I could like maybe send you guys a list later to add to the show notes, but it is
Hi.
so big. Like we are in policy and legislation, we are in veteran services, we are in children's services and adult protective services. We're in hospitals, we're in residential treatment facilities, we're in outpatient treatment facilities, mental health, substance use, eating disorder recovery, you name it, we're there. I was in integrated care in a doctor's office, which was wonderful because for the folks that you might recommend go to therapy, but maybe they're an older generation or they're just not ready for it yet, having someone accessible in the office to warm handoff to and maybe do some brief coping, validation, education to transition them to somebody else was a really rewarding experience. So yeah, we are everywhere. We're in housing and yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, I didn't know that all of those different areas. I knew social workers were a lot of different places, but I didn't know the extent of it. So that's really neat. And it's really cool that you were able to work sort of as like a transition for people who weren't quite ready to say, yes, I need to go see a counselor. Because that can be so hard sometimes.
Yeah. It can be.
Like I know I'm waiting for my acceptance letter officially, but I'm going to be going to school to be a counselor. So very exciting. Yes. Um, but even though I'm so invested in counseling and helping people, for me personally, it's still hard to make that decision to say, I need to go talk to somebody to help sort through things in my life. So that's really neat to be able to be that transitional person. It took like, telling one person this like big thing that was in my life. And then I was like, okay, I'm a little more open. And then I
Yeah.
told one more person and was like, you know what? I really do. It's okay. I'm not going to be met with judgment, I guess, is kind of what I needed to say, you know what? I'm taking that step. So that's really cool to have a transitional person like that in someone's life.
Yeah, there's like two things there for me is that it makes me think like, people look at and then there's also the clinical side of social work, which is being a therapist, and then there's the non-clinical side of like maybe more community organizing or just services that aren't mental health counseling.
Hmm.
So oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. It just totally lost me. Um I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
It happens.
We can skip on to
Yeah,
the next one, and if it comes back, it comes back.
Yeah.
thank
Um,
you.
um, um, so we introduced you as being the founder and president of Carve Your Own Path. Tell us a little bit more about that company.
Yeah, so I worked in social services and nonprofit organizations, organizations throughout my undergraduate in psychology, and then throughout my master's in social work, and then a few years afterward. And um, when you choose a profession like I did, you really care and you just feel called to giving back to others and helping them see in themselves what we see in them, right? That they're maybe don't feel like they can reach yet. And the experiences I had, something was always missing. Um, it was very systematic and programmatic and kind of cookie cutter services for people without recognizing the individual humanity that was there, their own individual cultures and backgrounds and experiences and belief systems and values, right? Learning styles, just the way their brains work, right? Like just so many different things that need to be taken into account if you truly want to help someone heal. Um, and also they just weren't super healthy places to exist as an employee or a client, sadly. And I just felt like something different could be done. I got to the point at one job where I had developed fibromyalgia because of the stress and some hereditary things there. So I was using my FMLA like all the time because I was so lethargic and just in massive amounts of pain and migraines and just so many challenging things physically. And alongside that, I also started to have some depressed and suicidal ideations that were really scary. I hadn't had anything like that before. So I got to the point where I couldn't stay at that job anymore. Thankfully, I was privileged enough to have a partner that could cover our finances until I, quickly found something else. But from that moment, I just felt liberated and felt, wait a minute, maybe I could do this different. Not every nonprofit has to be this uncomfortable. So I founded Carve Your Own Path in November 2018, and slowly but surely kind of built that up as I worked myself out of working for others. Our goal is to bring the things that society doesn't teach you about mental health and wellness, to empower you with the skills that you need to heal and thrive in life. So we offer different holistic treatment. We offer mental health counseling, but we also add a little spice if you're interested with art therapy or embodied therapy, which is kind of a combination of mindfulness and breath work and some yoga principles with talk therapy. We also offer yoga classes and Reiki, and we do a lot of workshops for the community and presentations for other mental health professionals on those topics.
That's awesome. Yeah, what I love that you guys offer such a wide variety
Yeah, they're in that
of
show.
things for different types of therapy because people need different types of things. We were talking in the car actually earlier today about kids in particular needing alternatives potentially to just normal sort of talk therapy. They need, art therapy might be great because doing art makes it just opens up different avenues of communication, or maybe it's play therapy or music therapy, or a whole bunch of different things. So that's really neat.
Yeah, we actually find it works. I don't know if best is the right word, but it flows really well when people, so like for example, if someone is engaging in therapy with my art therapist and that's going really great, but there's something underlying somewhere and we just can't uncover it with the modalities that we're using. We might say, hey, there might be like some blockages energetically going on. Would you like to try like a Reiki session with Lisa? And then, they might, just like you might get a massage and also go to the chiropractor, or see your primary care doctor and also go to the gym to work out. Like it's like they complement each other and they work in different ways, but they also work in conjunction. So someone might go to a Reiki session and have some energy cleared up, and the next therapy session they might say, hey, this came up for me in that session or in between, or these are the symptoms that I'm noticing changes in since then. And it's really great to do that with not only our own services, but then also collaborating with intentional community partners like
Mm.
chiropractors, acupuncturists, naturopathic doctors, regular doctors, whatever they might need to address them holistically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we are so complicated as humans. There are many different facets of who we are. And so it makes sense that different, modalities of therapy would work for different parts of us. So that's neat.
And you kind of already answered the question as far as like kind of like providing an instance where you struggle with mental health, dealing with the toxicity in the workplace. I know a lot of people like kind of like deal with that, and I think they just like for some they just like follow it up and just kind of like stick with it because it's their job, and that just causes more stress on the brain and then leads to other things. So I mean, good on you for, realizing that and like, carving your own path. Um, so one of the last interview questions we had, what is, and they, I guess I'm doing all the questions.
You are. Yeah, that's okay.
Um,
We're both tag
yeah.
teaming.
Okay. So for self-care, now a lot of people think what self-care is like taking a bubble bath or, going shop retail therapy. But for you, what it really is self-care and what do you do for self-care?
I love this, and I love that you brought up the bubble bath. Ironically, I do a presentation called Self Care Beyond the Bubble Bath.
Oh yeah.
Um, because, okay, I'm not going to lie, like for most people, bubble baths are great. Uh,
Hmm.
however, it's not the whole picture. So bubble baths are great as like if you're listening to your body and it feels like, oh, I'm achy, let me put some Epsom salts in there and take a bath, or I
Yeah.
want to breathe in, a nice aromatic smell and have some like healing music on and really be intentional with it if it's part of a routine. But if you get to the point where you're so stressed out and overwhelmed that you're like, oh my god, I just have to drink a glass of wine in the bath, then now we're at the point of self-preservation, not self-care.
Right.
And also, just the society doesn't teach us these things. Like, what is true self care? So, we actually use something called the 8 dimensions of wellness through the abbreviation is SAMHSA, but it's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. It's a government entity, and it's a circle of circles. Sometimes I have one sitting here. It's a it's a circle of circles. I do that kind of overlap with different dimensions of wellness: environmental, spiritual, social, occupational,
Mm.
mental, physical, all of the financial, all of the different dimensions. So I actually like to teach people about those because it might not even come to you as something to think of, that you need to work on your intellectual wellness and what that means. But also you can complement if you have like one hobby that flows into all of them. Because I think like people might get overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, now I have to do something for every dimension. Oftentimes they overlap. I give the example of like kayaking for one of my clients. They brought that up and I got so nerdy and I was like, do you know that you are engaging in so many different areas of wellness with that activity? Like it's physical wellness, it's spiritual, it's social because you're going with friends, it's emotional slash mental because it's meditative. Like there was so much good there. So yeah, I like to look at it holistically from that lens and then kind of break it down, and if it was an ideal day and you magically were balancing all of them at once, what would
Mm.
tasks or things that would be going on in each of those areas to give you a plan. So for me personally, some of those things look like in the moment giving myself grace when I get really overwhelmed or frustrated because the spiral into an escalated stress response and the negative
Yeah.
self-talk, and it just is, it's not good. So that, and a tool I use in that moment is breath. Your breath is always with you. So for most people, it can be a really great tool to help regulate your nervous system. A really good support system is important for me. I have so many different things going on in my life that if I didn't have a great support system, including friends, families, professional, all sorts of areas of support, I would not be able to be this, who I am today and our nonprofit be where it is. Creatively, which I think I put into intellectual because it's not on those dimensions, but I think that's a whole other area as well. So I like to just random creative things if I'm at like Michael's or something and I find like a dot art or just some kind of fun craft, I'll do that. Or even at like Five Below, I'll get like a kid's coloring book. Like I really like to honor my inner child and just play. I love being outside and getting fresh air. Um, yeah, those are kind of my common routine ones.
Well, to borrow a phrase from Anna Green Gables, you and Rebecca are kindred spirits because she also likes to color.
I do. I love it. Although I've got adult coloring books that are very intricate. They're very fun though.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, that's great. This definitely gives us a lot of background, and so talking about self-care and the words that we use, and kind of how the negative words can placate us. That gives us a great segue to our first film that we're talking about. So we chose two short films, and the reason why I did this is last year we did stuff like Inside Out, we did Up, and I think, well, what if we did a different direction, maybe shorter durations, or maybe short films for that matter. So the first one I found is Overcomer, and that is by a woman named Hannah Sprackler. I think she goes by Hannah Grace on YouTube, and it's this animated, um, about 5.5, 6 minutes, and I love short films that do not use any dialogue. The animation and the soundtrack is just so moving that there are words like text on it, just to kind of like supplement. But I mean, it was so powerful, and it gives us a look into the mind of somebody who struggles with self doubt, harmful, toxic thoughts. And so let's kind of go into that. Amanda, what were your first impressions with this short film?
I loved it. And it made me realize I need to look for those more. Because so something that's very different now than even 10 years ago when I was starting, is access to media and education via media.
Yeah,
And so we engage with it. We don't, there's social media policies and all sorts of other like
yeah.
informed consent things with that. But like if I see um, a TikTok or an Instagram post or something that I feel like would help resonate with, like, for my client, or reinforce something we've been talking about, or validate something they were sharing with me that maybe I couldn't come up with the words for in the moment. They share things with me of like, hey, this helps me relate and show you how I'm feeling when I can't verbalize that. So yeah, I just loved it, and it made me think like, okay, I should probably be, especially the short ones, right? Looking for those with my clients and just the general public. And then I also was like, 18th birthday is how it starts out. And it made me think about all the different stages of development we go through, and how normal it is as a human experience in America when you kind of graduate high school and then you're transitioning and you're supposed to just
Mhm.
magically figure out what to do next,
Right.
without much guidance. Like someone holds your hand for 18 years, hopefully, if you grow up in a decent living environment and home and
Mhm.
all that. But someone holds your hands for 18 years and then they're like, okay, go figure it out. Good luck. And know what you want to do for the rest of your life forever right now.
Yeah,
It's right. Like that was the
It's
first
very
thing I thought
daunting.
of.
it
No one,
was.
no one prepared you for that.
No.
They gave you equations for like geometry and algebra
Yeah,
and taught you the
like,
presidents. Like, what are you supposed to do with that information?
yeah, is that like there was like life science class, and when we were in school, like there was some like personal finance class. There
Mhm.
was like there
We didn't
was
even
no.
do home ec.
Yeah,
Like that's gone
yeah,
from high
like no
schools.
home ec.
Yeah.
The only reason I know how to make poppy seed muffins is from home ec. I mean, that one course. Um, but yeah, there were no like real like courses to prepare you for life, and a lot of people think that 18 is this magic number where you're supposed to have everything figured out. We're still figuring things out.
Yeah, right.
Uh,
Yeah,
um,
20. Our brain development doesn't stop until 25
yeah,
for a normal developing brain, right? But then somehow our societal processes aren't aligning with that. And then we wonder why these 18 to 25-year-olds have such a challenging time in so many ways.
right, right.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of grace given to those individuals either.
Mm-hmm.
When it's like, well, yeah, of course they made a stupid decision. Like they haven't quite,
Yeah,
formulated all of their
yeah,
everything
yeah.
they need
Yeah,
to
and
be a full
don't use
adult.
that one mistake to, define them just because, they did this, or, what have you. Um, and I feel a lot of younger people, like especially like Gen Z now, goes on like, TikTok because they want that that affirmation, and they want those likes, they want those hits of dopamine. That's why we have um, some artists that do music kind of like around mental health. A few people, Sad Alex, Megan Brown does a lot of things for religious trauma. And there was like one that blew up really big a few months ago with a song called Chronically Cautious. Again, just um, life of a creator, you're always thinking, what's the next big thing? How can I make this into a bit? Blah, blah, blah. But you do this cycle, and I've been there too, where okay, this one thing is sticking, how can we do more of it? And the more repetitive it gets, you're going by formula, because oh, this did well. It's draining, and then you feel. I felt so tired. I felt uninspired. Oh, rhymed. Okay. um, that do I really want this? Is this even worth it? And then I kind of get a fresh hit, just going out, taking a walk, prayer time. That there's a renewing of my thinking and my spirit. To be like, yeah, this is why I started. This is why I want to reach people. Um, so it's a bit of a tangent, but kind of like going with this theme, because we see the young woman in this animated short that she's scrolling through social media, and she sees posts from the friends saying, oh, there's no people I'd rather be within this group of people. It's like, well, I'm not there, you know. And then the negative thoughts is like, nobody loves me. I'm not worthy. They hate me. All that stuff. Um, Amanda, with toxicity and negative thoughts, can you give us a little bit more detail, more insight into that part of the short?
Sure. Excuse me. My cat is, just being a
It's like
vibe here on the floor.
it's like
It's funny. I thought it was a child.
Yeah, it could also be that one's upstairs.
oh,
All the noises. We have two cats and two dogs and a 19-month-old. I forgot to share that part
oh,
about me. So,
Wonderful.
yeah, it's a wild life here. Yeah, so there's so many things I could say here. So toxic thoughts, when I think about it, especially in the time frame of your 18th birthday, I won't get too clinical and dive all the way into it, but there's psychological stages from Eric Erickson's research for certain stages of our life. And the 12 to 18, it ends at 18 and starts at 18 and another. So just to kind of, in case there's a little leeway needed, just to kind of cover both of those, that 12 to 18 is really where so there's a crisis at each stage that needs to be overcome in order for a successful psychological identity to be developed later in life. And so the role there with that 12 to 18 is, do I know who I am, or am I confused about my identity? And they develop that sense of self through looking at the world, right? And so where I shared before, when I grew up, I went to school and played outside with people. And eventually I think maybe in high school there was like AIM. But like the kids now, their comparison on social media and who they are is rampant, right? So that's one step there. And then 18 to 40 is like intimacy versus isolation. So now you have access to all these people at your fingertips. Some of them you don't even know and could not be true about who they are, but you're connecting with them because you want to feel safety and connection and intimacy with somebody. So when you're comparing yourself to others and you're feeling maybe senses of rejection, or people are outright saying negative or unhelpful things about you, that gets internalized as our internal self-talk and our internal dialogue and our view of the world. And the longer that we focus on those thoughts and allow them to persist and kind of spiral into negativity without trying to interrupt them, then that becomes our self-concept. And it can be really challenging that's where you might see people that are like really angry or lethargic or depressed or unmotivated, or even the other, with the anxiety, worry. And so all of those messages that were coming across the screen were totally like those messages they had heard before that were now playing through on a tape.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, it makes me think of well, it makes me think of my own life and different things that happened at different stages of how I developed and where honestly it gives insight as to where I'm plagued with a lot of self-hatred and um I'm realizing how much that and that was developed in high school, that time frame. And yeah, so and it's I'm realizing now that it's permeated a lot of different areas of my life in ways that I could not expect it to. And so yeah, that's interesting to hear the different stages of development.
Yeah, and you can Google them. Like they're summarized very well on a decent amount of websites, legit websites. And then since you know you're going to be seeking out that therapy, that can be something good for you to bring into session,
Yeah.
ready to talk about as a goal or something you want to explore. Because if you've never been to therapy before, just education for everyone. Your first session is going to be an assessment where they're going to ask you about you know your mental health symptoms, your
Mhm.
history, your family, all of those
Right.
things. But they're also going to make a treatment plan. So you know those are really great things, and that's another great thing about access to information now. People will come in and already know what's going on for or an idea of it and want to explore that.
Yeah, certainly helpful for the counselors so they don't have to wade through all of the other stuff, like, well,
Mm-hmm.
that's not it. That's not it.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And going kind of like bouncing off the eight stages of development, we see that demonstrated in the short film
Mm-hmm.
because with her self-doubt and the toxic thoughts, she scrolls across the post, her 18th birthday. I guess it's her mom or one of their family members posting a picture of when she was a young girl. And it's we see kind of like the development of, oh, I was so creative. I love to draw. I love to color. And that that visualization of her connecting with her inner child, I thought was really beautifully done because the child is just, carefree at first and she's, drawing these patterns in the circle. And the one that's like, no, I'm not really into that anymore. I mean, that's great for you and us at that time, but I'm not really, you know, I'm not really talented. And that thought, like, like a dagger to the heart, goes into her younger self, and then we see that progression of self-doubt where she draws somebody says, oh, that's stupid or that's not any good, and you see these physical like chains around her. I forget what book it's in or what verse, but it says in the Bible that life and death is in the tongue, and the words have weight. We've heard like sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
So false.
BS. Words hurt. I mean,
Yeah.
and the more self doubt, the more toxic and negative thoughts, the heavier and the weightier and the longer those chains get. And it can weigh you down so much, like heaviness. And when you can like go to a therapist or go to a counselor, or even do something like self-care, or try to navigate through those thoughts and those process with somebody who knows how to, that weight starts to be taken off, and it's like a physical shift for you. I know a lot of people who have been through counseling therapy. It's like, what's different than that? It's like, I just feel so much lighter, like, not in a physical sense, but an emotional. And, they just have such a different demeanor about themselves. Um, Keeping patient confidentiality, I'm sure you've worked with people who have had that outcome or are nearing that outcome.
Yeah, and it does become physical. So so when I got my own, all right, let me wind back. When I got diagnosed with fibromyalgia and I was
Mhm.
having all this toxic stress, and then I was having all these other, there were so many other symptoms and things that were going on, co-occurring things, that I found the mind body connection research and just dove down the rabbit hole and just was reading and consuming and listening and researching and I got really frustrated that we've been had this in our research for centuries now
Yeah.
about physical or mental like challenges lead to physical disease. So yeah, it definitely bogs you down. Like those chains bog down. You don't have any physical energy to do anything. You don't have, your brain isn't firing synapses telling you to go do and achieve and think positive. Our brains are very smart, but they're kind of lazy, as I've adopted from one of our podcast therapy guests. um, so our brains are wired for survival. So over time, as you have experiences and collect data for a certain point on how to respond to a situation in life in order to survive, your brain takes that and collects it and just responds in the moment with that data without giving you the reference to know where the data came from. So to bring it all back to the negative thoughts, if you heard over and over and over again that you weren't good enough, or you didn't fit in, or you couldn't do math, or whatever the thing is, later in life when you go to do something related to that and you feel feelings about it, even though you can't verbalize what's actually happening,
Yeah.
that's where that mental health has been just buried, right? And it's still in there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just it's crazy how like our brains work, because we're supposed to be, we have the right side and the left side, both logical and creative. But uh, our brain, as you said, is kind of like lazy, where we tell ourselves enough some things, and we hear some things enough times, our brain starts to turn that into reality, um, to where sometimes we can't differentiate a lie from the truth. Um, so
Yeah.
yeah,
And from a Christian perspective, it makes me think of why the Bible says to meditate on these or think on these things that are good, that are pure, that are lovely, on Scripture itself, and our spiritual lives in general. The things that you think about, that's what will be turned into reality. It's so important to watch what you think, and to mediate that.
yeah. Um, so going into so for the sake of time, going into our second short film called "The Story of My Depression." This comes from us from the YouTube channel titled "Ida and Eddie." And what was interesting about this short is that the way that she described depression, because when I thought of depression, I'm like, oh, they're always sad, they're always, not happy, um, all the time. And how she kind of like presented it was, well, no, I mean, they can feel nothing at all. They can feel angry. They can sometimes feel, other different variety of emotions. Amanda, when you've worked with individuals that may suffer from depression, we call it an invisible disease. Can you explain more about that?
Yeah, so it's, if you have diabetes and you need to prick your finger and take insulin, and people can see and know that you do that, then they believe that you have a disease and that you might need to have some accommodations because of
Yeah.
that. Unfortunately, if you say I have depression, you can't really like scan your brain, or there's no objective data to be like, hi, I took a blood test and I have depression. It's more of
Right.
an internal experience. And yeah, you're absolutely right. As far as like diagnosed, oops, it is nice to be right. That's what Siri said. There's a certain criteria for each mental health diagnosis, and you don't necessarily have to have every criteria. It's just a certain amount, and there's lots of that goes into it, and that's why there's people trained in it. But yeah, the sadness is just one potential symptom that could be related to that. But there's fatigue, there's being less active than you are, like more lethargic than you are usually, feeling worthless or feeling inappropriately guilty, inability to concentrate, having suicidal thoughts or ideations, losing interest or pleasure in doing things, weight loss or gain. So there's a lot of different factors that can go into depression. And there's also a difference between having a, a depressed mood that makes sense given whatever the situation is,
Yeah.
and a diagnosis of depression as well.
Yep.
Looks very different, and it looks very different depending on who you are as an individual as well, and all of those different cultural factors, spiritual factors that come into it.
Yeah, when we say depression, it's so misleading to use kind of the same word of I am depressed, which is a true statement. I'm sad. I'm depressed. But like I have depression. It's totally different. Yeah, this short was really interesting. I dealt with depression in high school, and listening to her story, I was like, oh gosh, yeah, that was not everything, but a lot of it was really similar. Like looking back on that time, I don't remember anything really, nothing meant anything. Um, and I've talked with other people who are currently or from the past going through depression. It's the same type of a thing. There's like I feel nothing. I'm just numb. There, there's nothing there. And it's like, oh gosh, it's so hard. So hard. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's also extra challenging the fact that there's more and more now, right, as we've talked about, but especially earlier on, when we were growing up, there was that lack of education to better understand, hey, this is what's happening, or see it in other people, how to recognize it, how to support it, how to find help with that or regulate it. And oftentimes something that's seen just like kind of about with the short with the relationship with the mother and trying to just get her to see that is that other people when they don't have the education either are their discomfort is obvious. So I think of this most with like grief. When you have a loss, oftentimes people don't know what to say. They feel like they need to say something, but they're not sure what to say. And it's an awkward situation because no one taught them how to do this. And so they're like, oh, sorry for your loss. Let me know if you need anything, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and so, or like, if someone says, hey, I'm really depressed or I'm struggling with suicidal thoughts, people might be like, oh my God, do you need to go to the hospital? Like, right? Because no one taught them how to
Yeah.
respond, which makes it even more challenging to navigate, even if you can get the oomph enough to vocalize that to someone because you feel safety and trust.
Correct. And that's one thing that they talk about in the short film is, the ability to like vocalize or the inability to vocalize, what they're going through. This individual, had to go to, a doctor. This is, oh yeah, you had depression. How we respond to it, as you said, Amanda, we haven't been trained or we don't know the best way to respond because when somebody is like, oh, depression or depressed, it's like, well, buck up and, it'll get better. That's not the best response, nor should it be our go-to because, you think that they haven't thought of that yet? I mean, um, for for how you approach it, how do you approach someone when they're dealing with depression? Like, what if you could just take us through maybe just some steps that you do for a diagnosis or analysis?
Yeah, so I'm looking at the whole person. I'm really trying to dig in, but at the same time, we recognize that it takes time to build rapport, trust, safety. Even in my own therapy experiences, I'm not just going to show up and be like, okay, here you go. Here's everything that happened to me and for you, because that can be scary for many
Yeah.
reasons. So it's an ongoing working not necessarily diagnosis because we don't diagnose unless the client wants it or it's absolutely needed. In my
Right.
practice, we're thankful to not have to do that because honestly everything doesn't need to be pathologized, especially when there's enough external factors going on societally and things like that. But yeah, we're just looking at what happened to you, what's your history, what's your current support system, what's level, like what stressful things do you have going on, what coping skills or regulation skills do you already have or do you need to build. What does your environment look like? Do you have a safe, space to sleep? Do you have a safe place that you can go to cope if you need to? So we're always looking at it very holistically and multifaceted. And then there's a lot of validation that happens on the clinical side. If someone's sharing that they feel depressed and then they end up getting into a narrative about where those thoughts may be coming from or an experience that happened, just validation of like, yeah, this is like a normal biological response to something that was pretty abnormal. That makes sense that you would respond that way. And just giving people like education and validation at the same time. And then just for the general public, like if someone tells you something really challenging, you can say, thank you so much for feeling comfortable enough to tell me that. Right? Like you don't necessarily have to fix anything, which I think is something
Right.
that happens in that discomfort. People are like, oh my God, I need to fix this. But no, they probably just want your presence. And you can even ask them, like, is this something, like, do you need to talk about it more? Would you like me to sit here and listen? Or did you just, want someone to sit with you? Or,
Yeah.
if you know them better, you could even suggest something like, okay, do you want me to get you your favorite throw blanket and make you some popcorn? Or like, like something comforting in that way. But yeah, not being afraid to just give someone support.
Absolutely. I know
Those are great
with
suggestions. I love it.
certainly with Rebecca, whenever she's like been dealing with something like as a husband, like we want to do the fixture. That's like our mindset. It's like, how can I fix this? How can we need to, fix this, we need to find a solution. And over the years I've learned that it doesn't need an immediate fix. This is a process and where I just need to be present, listen, not necessarily need to say anything, but just be present, open. And if she asks, my thoughts or advice, I'll deliver whatever it is the best that I can. So absolutely offering that support, comfort, and whatever that looks like.
And I
So
gotta say,
yeah.
you're really good at it, Josh.
Well, not tooting my own horn here.
Well, you are. It's been very helpful, just from a personal experience, to just be there. Like you said, all of those things, it's been really good and built our relationship. So that's how other people, I think, not in the exact same way, but
Mm.
other people can build relationships that way too.
And
Being
like
open.
we all want love and belonging and acceptance,
Yeah,
right? Like we all have that need,
Absolutely.
and just like back to like survival of the species, we're a pack species. Like we don't want to be not we don't want to be turned away by, like, that's a biological need, right? We want to be
Yeah.
yeah,
known that regardless of how we show up, we're affirmed and appreciated and celebrated and welcomed, and we're going to be safe. And
right.
also just it's so beautiful that you two have been able to create that, because that's the benefits of building a rapport with your therapist as well. Is for many people it's the first time they've had a safe relationship. So if
Mhm.
you two have been able to do that, we always encourage people, like especially when they have a hard time leaving therapy or transitioning out, it's like you built the skills to trust and know that you can build a healthy relationship
Yes,
with others, right? So you can carry those skills that you've built into creating more valuable relationships as well.
Yeah. So true.
absolutely. And yeah, as you said, Amanda, a lot of the first time that they may have had a meaningful relationship is with their therapist, and then after therapy, that's kind of when I guess the real work might start, because taking those skills that they've gained in therapy and demonstrating them out in the real world. Absolutely. And what you said, that community and belonging, that is part of our human nature. There's a song by the band Saint Israel several years ago called "We Need Each Other," um, and one line says like, "No one's meant to be alone," and I mean, I can't find any greater truth than that
Mm-hmm.
in regards to mental health.
Yeah.
Because when we're dealing with something, I know for me, when I'm dealing with like anxiety or something of that nature, my immediate response is to be reclusive, to be isolated. And that goes so great in like bring me out of it, that I tend to, not always, but less and less turn to that as my first go-to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, so both of these links for these videos will be in the description. Amanda, we have had such a great time speaking with you. You've given us and our listeners great wealth of knowledge in such a short time. Again, we could be here for much longer, just because there are a lot of different facets we could cover. If people want to keep up with you or follow you, where can they find you?
Yeah. So you can go to carvemypath.org and hop on our email list. We're actually going to be switching over websites in the next month or so. So make sure you hop on the email list so you can stay in the know. And then Instagram, we are CYOP Inc. INC. And we are also that on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the places. So come and follow us there.
All right, awesome.
Great.
Well, once again, we're going to be continuing this for the month of May. So Get ready for this for the next 3 weeks. And as always, keep those halos shiny and stay holy, my friends. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.